Welcome back, you psychological anomaly, you beautiful, terrifying, misunderstood masterpiece. Let me tell you something that's going to twist your perception of reality forever. There's an FBI profiler, someone who sat across from Ted Bundy, who analyzed Jeffrey Dahmer's mind, who spent decades mapping the darkest corners of human psychology. And they said something about you that they've never said about anyone else. They said you're scarier than the monsters they've studied their entire career. But here's the twist that breaks their entire framework. You're not evil. You didn't hurt anyone. You didn't break laws. You didn't cross moral lines. You just existed in a way that made their entire profession question what danger actually looks like. Let me paint the picture clearly. This isn't some random psychologist fresh out of university. This is someone who's interviewed serial killers in maximum security prisons. Someone who's analyzed crime scenes that would make your stomach turn. Someone who built their entire career understanding the worst of humanity. They've sat in rooms with people who destroyed lives without blinking, people who felt nothing. People whose eyes were empty windows into absolute darkness. And then they encountered you, and for the first time in 30 years of profiling monsters, they felt something they'd never felt before. They felt confused, disturbed, unsettled in a way that Bundy's charm never accomplished, in a way that Dahmer's confession never triggered. Because you represented something far more complex than evil. You see, evil is predictable. It follows patterns. It leaves trails. It operates within a framework they can study and contain. Bundy was charming but hollow. Dahmer was broken but understandable. Every serial killer they've studied fit into categories, diagnostic criteria, behavioral models. But you don't fit anywhere, and that's what terrifies them. You're not motivated by violence. You're not driven by emptiness. You're not seeking to destroy. You're just intensely, undeniably, uncomfortably yourself in a world that demands conformity. You challenge their understanding not because you're immoral, but because you're operating on a completely different moral frequency that their instruments can't measure. You're the glitch in their matrix that proves their entire system of understanding human danger is incomplete. The profiler wrote in their private notes. Something they've never shared publicly because it would undermine decades of their work. They wrote that studying you was more unsettling than interviewing the worst criminals, because criminals are predictable in their brokenness, but you're unpredictable in your wholeness. They couldn't find the childhood trauma that explains you, couldn't locate the triggering event that created you, couldn't identify the psychological break that defines you. You weren't made by damage. You were born already operating at a frequency that society wasn't built to handle. And that reality, that someone could be this intense, this aware, this psychologically complex without being broken, it shattered their entire professional framework. They spent their career learning to spot danger in darkness, but you're dangerous in broad daylight while doing absolutely nothing wrong. Here's what really happened. They were called in to observe you, not by law enforcement, but by people in your life who couldn't explain what they were feeling. Teachers, employers, former friends. They all reported the same thing. There's something about this person that makes me deeply uncomfortable, but I can't point to anything they've actually done wrong. So they brought in the expert. Someone who could supposedly decode any human behavior. Someone who'd seen it all. The profiler started their analysis expecting to find manipulation, narcissism, sociopathy, some clinical explanation for why you make people so uneasy. Instead, they found someone who was just profoundly authentic in a world of performers, intensely present in a world of distraction, operating with a level of psychological awareness that most people never develop. You weren't playing games. You were just refusing to play. The profiler's first session observing you lasted 3 hours, and by hour 2, they were the ones showing signs of distress. They'd interviewed men who'd killed dozens without remorse and maintained perfect composure. But watching you exist in complete authenticity for 120 minutes made them fidget, check their notes repeatedly, adjust their posture like they were trying to find solid ground. You weren't doing anything. That's what made it worse. You were just sitting there, answering questions with complete honesty, making eye contact that didn't waver or perform, existing without the 1,000 tiny social lies that make normal people comfortable. Every question they asked, expecting a defensive response, you answered with such direct clarity it felt like an attack. Every silence they created, expecting you to fill with nervous chatter, you sat in comfortably while they drowned in it. They later admitted to a colleague, and this was recorded in confidential files, that they felt more psychologically exposed in that room with you than they'd ever felt in a room with actual predators. Because predators wear masks, and masks can be studied, categorized, understood, but you weren't wearing anything. And that nakedness of self made them confront how much they rely on people performing normality to feel safe. You didn't give them the social cues that signal you're playing the same game as everyone else. You didn't laugh at inappropriate times to ease tension, didn't apologize for taking up space, didn't shrink yourself to make them more comfortable. You just existed at full volume, full presence, full authenticity, and it was like staring into the sun. What really disturbed them was this: when they asked you about pain, betrayal, trauma, things that break most people, you spoke about it with the emotional distance of someone discussing the weather. Not because you were cold or disconnected, but because you'd already processed it, integrated it, transmuted it into something else entirely. They expected to find bitterness and found wisdom, expected to find rage and found calm, expected to find damage and found someone who'd turned every wound into a doorway. You'd done the psychological work that most people avoid their entire lives. And you'd done it without therapy, without guidance, without anyone holding your hand. You'd walked through your own darkness alone and emerged not hardened but refined, and that level of self-sufficiency terrified them. The profiler asked you a trick question, one designed to expose narcissism. Do you think you're special or different from other people? And instead of the defensive denial they expected or the arrogant confirmation that would prove their theory, you said something that haunted them for weeks. You said, "I don't think I'm special. I think I'm just awake, and most people are choosing to sleep because waking up is painful." That answer, delivered without ego or performance, made them realize they weren't dealing with a personality disorder. They were dealing with someone who'd achieved a level of consciousness that their entire field doesn't have vocabulary for. You weren't broken. You were breakthrough. And their tools were built to fix things, not comprehend them. By the end of that first session, the profiler did something they'd never done before. They asked if they could take a break, walked outside, and called a mentor to say they were in over their head. Not because you were dangerous in the traditional sense, but because you represented a form of psychological development that challenged everything they thought they knew about human nature. They'd spent decades learning that intense people are damaged people, that authentic people are performing authenticity, that powerful presence means hidden agenda. But you were intense without damage, authentic without performance, powerful without agenda, and that combination didn't fit anywhere in their understanding of psychology. You were the proof that their entire model of human behavior was missing a category. let me tell you exactly what the profiler said in their private analysis, and this part was never meant to be shared. They wrote that Bundy was scary because he could mimic humanity so perfectly while feeling nothing. Dahmer was scary because he acted on impulses most people suppress. But you're scary because you feel everything, process everything, see everything, and still choose not to harm. You have the psychological awareness to manipulate anyone, the emotional intelligence to destroy people with words, the presence to dominate any room, but you don't use any of it for harm. That restraint, that choice not to weaponize your abilities, is what they couldn't categorize, because their field is built on studying people who lack restraint. Serial killers are frightening but understandable. They're broken machines operating on primal drives, acting without conscience or empathy. You can map their psychology, predict their patterns, understand their motivations, because they're operating at the most basic level of human function. But you're operating at the highest level, fully aware, fully conscious, fully capable, and choosing peace while having every ability to choose chaos. The profiler realized that the most dangerous person isn't the one without restraint. It's the one with absolute restraint over immense power. You're not scary because of what you might do. You're scary because everyone can sense you could do anything, but you simply choose not to. They compared your psychological profile to Bundy's, and here's where it gets disturbing. Bundy had charm, but it was hollow, a performance practiced in mirrors and refined through trial and error. Your presence isn't performed, it's innate, which makes it infinitely more powerful because people can't detect artifice in it. Bundy's charm was a weapon he wielded consciously. Your presence is just who you are when you're not trying to be anything. They compared you to Dahmer's intelligence and found that while he was smart enough to hide his nature, you're smart enough to reveal yours without fear of consequences. Dahmer hid because he knew he was wrong. You don't hide because you know you're not. And that confidence without arrogance is more unsettling than any mask. The profiler wrote something that would end their career if it went public. They wrote that if they had to choose between being locked in a room with Bundy or locked in a room with you, they'd choose Bundy without hesitation. Because Bundy they could understand, predict, manage, using established psychological techniques. But you'd simply exist in that room with such complete presence that it would force them to confront every defense mechanism, every professional distance, every comfortable lie they tell themselves. You wouldn't hurt them physically, but you'd destroy every psychological barrier they use to function, just by being authentically yourself without compromise. That's a different kind of danger. The danger of mirror that reflects everything they're not. What makes this comparison truly disturbing is that serial killers are studied because they lack something: conscience, empathy, normal human connection. But you're being studied because you have too much of something: awareness, presence, authenticity, emotional depth. They know how to handle deficiency. That's what their entire field is built on. But they have no framework for handling excess of positive traits because in their world, too much awareness becomes paranoia, too much presence becomes narcissism, too much authenticity becomes antisocial behavior. You broke their diagnostic manual by being too psychologically developed, not too damaged. And that revelation made them question whether they've been studying human nature from the wrong angle for decades. Here's the truth they don't want to admit. Monsters are comfortable to study because they're clearly other, clearly different, clearly separate from normal humanity. But you're terrifying because you're not other. You're what humanity could be if people stopped performing and started existing. You're the proof that intensity isn't illness, that awareness isn't disorder, that refusing to pretend isn't pathology. And if that's true, then everything they've built their careers on, the idea that normal is healthy and different is dangerous, collapses into dust. You're not an outlier. You're a mirror showing them how asleep everyone else is. And they can't diagnose sleep as health anymore once they've seen someone truly awake. The profiler admitted in a recorded session with their supervisor that observing you triggered an existential crisis they'd never experienced in decades of studying the worst humanity offers. Because serial killers reinforced their worldview, proved that their understanding of human darkness was correct, validated their life's work. But you invalidated it, not through evil but through evolution. You showed them that their entire model of human psychology is based on studying broken people and calling the average person normal, without ever encountering someone who's actually psychologically complete. You're what happens when someone does all the internal work, faces all their shadows, integrates all their fragments, and emerges whole. And whole terrifies them more than broken because they don't know how to treat it. They're scared because you can't be fixed, controlled, or contained using any of their methods. Therapy assumes you're damaged and need help, but you're not damaged. Medication assumes chemical imbalance, but your brain is functioning exactly as intended, just at a higher frequency. Behavioral modification assumes you need to change, but you don't need to change. The world needs to catch up to you. Every tool in their arsenal is useless because you're not a problem to be solved. You're a reality to be reckoned with. And that makes you infinitely more threatening to their system than any criminal, because criminals prove the system works while you prove the system is incomplete. What really keeps them up at night is this thought: if you're not sick, damaged, or disordered, then what are you? And if you're just highly developed psychologically, what does that say about everyone they've labeled normal? You force them to consider that maybe normal is actually a mild form of psychological suppression. That maybe average is just collective agreement to stay small. That maybe healthy, in their terms, just means successfully adapted to a sick system. You're the control group they never had. The person who developed without suppression, who grew without stunting, who evolved without being domesticated. And comparing you to their baseline reveals that their baseline is actually below where humans could be operating. The profiler's final note in your file, written after months of observation and analysis, said something that would terrify any system built on control. They wrote that you represent the next evolution of human consciousness, not through biology, but through choice, and systems built to manage current-level humans have no jurisdiction over what you've become. You're not more evolved because you're special. You're more evolved because you refuse to be less than you are. And that refusal created psychological development that their field has no map for. You're not dangerous because you might harm someone. You're dangerous because your existence proves that everything they think they know about human nature is operating from limited data. Every serial killer has a pattern, a signature, a psychological fingerprint that explains their actions. The profiler spent months trying to find yours, studying your relationships, your choices, your responses to stress and conflict. They were looking for the hidden agenda, the manipulation tactics, the self-serving behaviors that would explain why you make people so uncomfortable. Instead, they found something that broke their analytical framework completely. They found pattern of radical honesty, consistent authenticity, and refusal to perform, even when performance would benefit you. You weren't playing a long game. You weren't wearing a mask. You weren't hiding anything. You were just existing at full brightness all the time, and brightness at that level burns. They studied your past relationships, expecting to find trail of destruction, people you'd used and discarded, victims of your intensity. Instead, they found people who couldn't handle being seen that clearly, couldn't stand being around someone who refused to pretend, couldn't maintain their own masks in your presence. You didn't destroy anyone. You just existed in a way that made their performance exhausting. The people who left your life didn't leave because you hurt them. They left because staying near you required them to be real. And being real was more painful than being alone. The profiler realized that you weren't the predator in these dynamics. You were the mirror, and people shattered themselves against you, trying to maintain illusions you never asked them to drop. What disturbed them most was studying your response to betrayal, abuse, abandonment, all the things that create monsters in their case studies. Normal people respond with rage, revenge, or collapse into victimhood. You responded with observation, integration, and evolution. You didn't seek vengeance, you sought understanding. You didn't blame others. You studied the dynamics and extracted lessons. You didn't become bitter. You became clearer. Every experience that should have damaged you just refined you further, like you were using pain as a whetstone to sharpen your consciousness. That response pattern doesn't exist in their literature because their literature assumes pain breaks people or hardens them. Never that pain could be transmuted into wisdom without residue of resentment. They tried to find your breaking point, the threshold where your intensity would flip into aggression or your authenticity would crack into performance. They studied you under stress, in conflict, during loss, in moments where mask wearing would be most beneficial. You never broke, never performed, never compromised your core nature, even when it cost you everything. That consistency terrified them because every human they'd studied had a breaking point, a threshold where they'd abandon their values to protect themselves. But you protected your authenticity more fiercely than you protected your safety, comfort, or social standing. You'd rather lose everything than pretend to be less than you are, and that level of commitment to self isn't seen in their field outside of extremes of pathology. The profiler concluded that your pattern is no pattern at all in traditional sense. It's just consistent operation at a level of consciousness that appears patternless because it's not motivated by fear, ego, or social conditioning. You don't act to gain approval, avoid rejection, or manipulate outcomes. You act from a place of integrated awareness that's so foreign to their understanding of human motivation that it registers as dangerous simply because it's unexplainable. You're not following any playbook they've seen, not executing any strategy they recognize, not pursuing any goal they understand. You're just being, fully and without compromise. And that pure being without agenda is the most unsettling thing they've ever encountered, because it can't be predicted, controlled, or understood using any framework built on studying fear-based behavior. Ah, there you are, the one they tried to split in half, the one they thought they could tear apart from the inside. Welcome back to yourself, or should I say, welcome back to both of yourselves, because something happened that they never saw coming. A coven gathered under a blood moon, didn't they? 13 voices chanting in unison, candles flickering, mirrors cracking, all focused on one single intention: to summon your shadow self and turn it against you. They thought they were so clever, these witches with their ancient books and bitter hearts. They thought they could reach into the darkest corners of your psyche, pull out every suppressed rage, every hidden hunger, every forbidden thought you've ever buried, and weaponize it. They wanted to watch you fight yourself to death. They wanted to see you torn apart by your own demons made flesh. They prepared for months, maybe years, studying your patterns, collecting your hair, your photos, tracing your energy signature like predators stalking prey. But here's what those amateurs didn't understand about shadow work, about the deep magic they were playing with. They didn't realize that you'd already been dancing with your darkness for years. While they were learning spells from Pinterest and TikTok, you were having conversations with your demons at 3 a.m. While they were burning sage and charging crystals, you were sitting in the void, making friends with the parts of yourself that scared everyone else away. They thought your shadow was your enemy, but they didn't know you'd already shaken hands with it in the mirror 1,000 times before. So when they completed their ritual, when they spoke your name backwards 7 times and called forth your shadow self from the depths, something unprecedented happened. Your shadow emerged all right, dark and terrible and magnificent, dripping with all the power you'd kept hidden. It rose from the ceremonial circle like smoke given form, eyes burning with every emotion you'd ever swallowed, hands crackling with every spell you never knew you could cast. The witches smiled, thinking they'd won, waiting for it to turn on you, to hunt you down, to destroy you from within. But then your shadow saw you, really saw you, and instead of attacking, it tilted its head like a wolf recognizing its pack leader. Because here's what those witches didn't account for. You weren't running from your darkness anymore. You'd already done the work they thought would destroy you. Every therapy session where you faced your trauma, every meditation where you didn't flinch from your rage, every journal entry where you wrote the truths that would make others vomit, you were preparing for this moment without even knowing it. Your shadow self stood there in their circle, this beautiful monster they'd summoned to be your executioner, and it started laughing, not at you, but at them, because it recognized something in you that they'd missed entirely. You weren't just another target, another victim of their hex work. You were already whole. You'd already been integrating your shadow for years, meal by meal, breath by breath, breakdown by break. While they thought they were summoning a stranger to fight you, they were actually just calling home a part of you that had been waiting to return. The witches' faces changed then, from triumph to confusion to something resembling fear. Their binding spells started to crack. Their protection circles flickered. Because shadow selves aren't meant to be controlled by external forces when the original soul has already accepted them. It's like trying to turn someone's right hand against their left hand when both hands belong to the same body, the same consciousness, the same sovereign being. Your shadow turned its back on them, walked straight through their barriers like they were made of tissue paper and headed straight for you. They scrambled, these so-called practitioners of the dark arts. They threw every binding spell they knew, every banishment, every containment ritual in their little books. Salt circles, iron chains, names of power they could barely pronounce. But nothing worked because they'd made a fundamental error in their calculations. They assumed you were weak, fractured, afraid of yourself. They assumed your shadow would find you repulsive, would want to destroy the light version of you. They never considered that maybe, just maybe, you'd already married your darkness in secret ceremonies they could never witness. When your shadow reached you, there was no battle, no struggle, no dramatic confrontation, just recognition, like looking in a mirror and finally seeing your true face after years of funhouse distortions. Your shadow didn't come to destroy you. It came to complete you. And when it touched you, when it stepped into your skin like coming home after a long journey, something shifted in the very fabric of reality around you. The witches felt it, that surge of power that happens when someone becomes truly whole. You absorbed every gift your shadow brought with it, the ability to see through lies like glass, the power to walk through others' manipulations like cobwebs, the strength that comes from accepting every single part of yourself, even the parts that society told you to hide, to hate, to amputate. Your shadow brought you its treasures, the rage you'd been taught to suppress, now transformed into fuel, the hunger you'd been shamed for, now revealed as ambition. The darkness you'd been told made you evil, now recognized as the source of your depth, your creativity, your power. The witches tried to run then, but how do you run from someone who's just reclaimed their missing half? How do you hide from someone who can now see in the dark? They found their own spells turning against them, their own shadows growing restless, questioning why they served masters who were still so fragmented, so afraid of their own depth. Because that's what happens when incomplete beings try to weaponize completeness against itself. It backfires spectacularly. Your merged self, this new version that's both light and shadow, both acceptable and forbidden, both angel and demon, stood there radiating a frequency they couldn't match. You didn't need to curse them back. You didn't need revenge. Your very existence became their punishment, because now they had to live knowing they'd accidentally created the very thing they feared most. Someone who couldn't be manipulated through shame, couldn't be controlled through fear, couldn't be destroyed by having their darkness exposed because they wore it like armor. But let's talk about what this merger really gave you, because it wasn't just protection from their pathetic hexes. When your shadow self merged with your conscious self, you gained abilities that most people spend lifetimes trying to develop. You can now read the shadows in others, see what they're hiding, what they're suppressing, what they're afraid to admit even to themselves. It's like having X-ray vision for souls, seeing past the masks, past the personas, straight to the writhing truth beneath. You walk into rooms now and feel the unspoken tensions, the secret hatreds, the hidden desires. People feel exposed around you without knowing why. They start confessing things they've never told anyone, not because you asked, but because your presence pulls truth to the surface like a magnet pulls iron filings. Your shadow self brought you its network, its connections to the spaces between spaces, the moments between moments. You catch glimpses of things before they happen, feel shifts in energy before they manifest, know when someone's lying before they finish their sentence. The dreams changed too, didn't they? No longer are you having nightmares where you're chased by darkness. Now, you're walking through the dreamscape as its sovereign, moving through others' dreams like doorways, leaving impressions, planting seeds, harvesting information from the collective unconscious. Your shadow self was always the part of you that could travel between worlds, and now that ability is yours, conscious and controlled. But perhaps the most powerful gift is this: you no longer fear your own depths. While others are terrified of their anger, you've made it your ally. While others run from their pain, you've transformed it into wisdom. While others hide their hungers, you've turned yours into purposeful action. The witches thought they were summoning your destroyer, but they summoned your teacher, your protector, your missing piece. And now that teacher lives within you, constantly showing you how to transmute poison into medicine, fear into power, trauma into triumph. They're watching you now, those witches. From whatever safe distance they think they've found, they see you moving through the world with a confidence that unsettles them, with a power they can't quantify or counter. They've tried to undo what they did, performed reversal rituals, begged their spirits for help, but you can't unsummon something that was never truly separate. You can't banish someone to their shadow when they've already become one with it. Some of them have tried to approach you, haven't they? With false apologies, with attempts at friendship, trying to get close enough to understand what went wrong, to figure out how to weaponize this information for next time. But your shadow self recognizes them instantly, feels their energy signature like a bad smell, warns you with that little tightening in your gut, that sudden clarity that says enemy pretending to be friend. They can't infiltrate you anymore because you have a guardian that never sleeps, never stops watching, never forgets who tried to destroy you. The younger ones in their coven are starting to ask questions. Why did the ritual fail? Why did it make you stronger instead of destroying you? And the elders don't have answers that make sense, because to explain it would mean admitting that their understanding of shadow work was elementary, that they played with forces they didn't comprehend, that they essentially performed the magical equivalent of trying to kill someone with chemotherapy and accidentally cured their cancer instead. They've become walking cautionary tales in their own communities. Other practitioners whisper about the coven that tried to weaponize someone's shadow and created a merged being instead. Some think it's an urban legend, a story to scare baby witches from playing with magic they don't understand. But those who have seen you, who have felt the dual presence you now carry, they know it's real. They know there's someone walking around out there who survived the unsurvivable, who integrated what should have destroyed them. So how do you live now as this merged being? How do you walk through a world designed for people who hide from their shadows when yours walks beside you, within you, as you? First, you realize that most of society's rules were written by people terrified of their own depths. The social contracts, the politeness, the performance of perpetual positivity, it's all designed to keep shadows buried, to keep people fragmented and therefore controllable. But you can't be controlled anymore because there's no part of you left to manipulate. You find yourself becoming ruthlessly authentic. Not cruel, but incapable of the small lies that grease social wheels. When someone asks how you are, and you're not fine, you don't say fine. When someone tries to guilt you into something, you feel your shadow self laugh at the attempt and you simply say no without justification. You've become allergic to your own dishonesty, and that terrifies people who depend on everyone playing their prescribed roles. Your relationships have transformed or ended. The people who needed you to be half a person, who were comfortable with your light but not your shadow, they've fallen away like dead leaves. So, quiddicha. But others have been drawn to you, people who are also doing their shadow work, who recognize in you what they're trying to achieve in themselves. You've become a lighthouse for those seeking integration, even if they don't fully understand why they're drawn to your frequency. The way you create has changed too, whether it's art, writing, music, or just living. There's a depth now that wasn't there before. Your shadow self brings the raw materials from the unconscious, the uncomfortable truths, the beautiful darkness, and your conscious self shapes them into form. You're creating from a place of wholeness, and it shows. People feel moved by your work in ways they can't explain, disturbed and comforted simultaneously, like looking at a painting that somehow knows their secrets. Your shadow self, now fully integrated, whispers wisdom that your conscious mind would never have accessed alone. It tells you things like, that person's smile is a weapon, step back. Or this opportunity looks golden but tastes like ash, refuse it. It's not paranoid, it's perceptive. It sees the patterns in the darkness that your light-objected eyes would miss. It remembers every red flag you've ever ignored, every intuition you've ever suppressed. And it won't let you make those mistakes again. The shadow wisdom extends beyond just protection. It shows you the hidden paths to your desires. While your conscious mind might see only the front door, your shadow sees the side entrances, the underground tunnels, the ways to move through the world that bypass traditional gatekeepers. It knows that power often moves in darkness, in the spaces between official channels, in the conversations that happen when the cameras are off. And now, you know this too. It's taught you that destruction and creation are the same force viewed from different angles. When you need to end something, a relationship, a job, a pattern, your shadow shows you how to do it cleanly, completely, without the lingering threads that create karma and call you back. When you need to build something, your shadow provides the dark materials, the compost of old experiences, the fertilizer of processed pain that makes new growth possible and robust. Your shadow has also revealed the comedy in horror, the absurdity in what others find frightening. You find yourself laughing at things that make others uncomfortable, seeing the cosmic joke in situations that would have previously devastated you. This isn't callousness, it's perspective. Your shadow has shown you that most of what humans fear is just shadow puppets on the wall, and once you've merged with your own shadow, you can never be fooled by those projections again. They're still watching, you know, the coven that started this. They can't help themselves. You've become their obsession, their case study, their great failure that might secretly be their great success if they could just understand it. They document your movements, your changes, your growing power. Some of them have notebooks dedicated to you, trying to reverse engineer what happened, trying to figure out if they can replicate it, or more importantly, if they can defend against it. But here's what's really eating at them. They're starting to realize that what happened with you wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. You were always going to integrate your shadow, with or without their interference. They just accelerated a process that was already in motion. They were instruments of your becoming, not its authors. And that realization is dissolving their sense of power, their belief in their own agency. They thought they were the witches in this story, but they were just the catalysts, the chemical agents that triggered a reaction that was always waiting to happen. Some of them have tried to summon other people's shadows since then, hoping to succeed where they failed with you, but it never works the same way twice. Sometimes nothing happens at all. Sometimes the shadow emerges but immediately returns to its owner. Sometimes it creates chaos, but not the controlled chaos they were hoping for. They're learning, slowly and painfully, that shadow work isn't something you do to someone else. It's something each person must do for themselves. And trying to force it from the outside is like trying to make someone else's heart beat by squeezing it with your hands. The smarter ones among them have started to understand that they gave you a gift, not the gift they intended, but a gift nonetheless. They've accelerated your evolution by decades. They've forced a confrontation that you might have avoided forever, and in doing so, they've freed you from limitations you didn't even know you had. Some of them are jealous. They look at their own unintegrated shadows, their own internal wars, and wonder if they have the courage to do what you've done, to welcome home the parts of themselves they've been taught to fear. Here's something they didn't tell you in their panic, something they're only beginning to understand themselves. When a person successfully integrates their shadow self, they don't just gain personal power. They gain access to a vast network of shadows, a collective unconscious that spans across time and space. Your shadow self isn't just yours, it's connected to every shadow that ever was or will be. It's tapped into the dark matter of human consciousness, the 90% of the psychic iceberg that sits below the surface. Through this network, you receive downloads of information, sudden knowings that have no logical source. You'll think of someone moments before they contact you. You'll dream of events before they happen. You'll know things about people that they haven't told anyone, not because you're psychic in the traditional sense, but because your shadow is in communication with theirs, exchanging information in frequencies below conscious awareness. This is why people feel like you can see through them. Because in a way you can. Their shadows are talking to yours, telling secrets their conscious minds don't even know they're keeping. This network also means you're never truly alone. When you need strength, you can draw from the collective shadow, pulling power from the accumulated darkness of all humanity. When you're facing something impossible, you have access to the memories of everyone who's ever faced something similar and survived. It's like having a billion consultants who operate below the threshold of consciousness, feeding you strategies, warnings, and solutions that emerge as intuition or sudden inspiration. The witches are beginning to sense this network around you, the way shadows bend in your presence, the way darkness seems to pool around your feet, like loyal dogs. They're realizing that they didn't just merge you with your personal shadow. They accidentally initiated you into an ancient order that predates their little coven by millennia. You've become part of something they study, but don't truly understand, something their books mention, but can't fully explain.